Hi there, I'm Audrey Christie, holistic wellness practitioner with audreychristie.com, and today we're talking about autoimmune disease. We're diving deep in the topic. We've been building towards it for a little bit now, so I want you to know, people want to know, why are we talking about autoimmune disease so much? But did you know that autoimmune disease has now exceeded the 10th leading cause of death in women under the age of 65? Yeah, so tune in. This stuff is important. This is not something that gets you when you get old. And even though there are some countries with better statistics than the US, this is not just a problem here stateside. It's a growing source of chronic disease worldwide. So we're going to talk about what autoimmune disease is not, what it is, and some of the why around it happens. Today we're not talking so much about nutrition because there's so much more to it than that. And so I really want you to have a foundation in place before you can make any nutritional changes that last. So before we talk about what autoimmune disease is, let's talk a little bit about what it is not. You may have heard that it's a disease that just comes out of nowhere and the body just starts attacking itself. Let's start right out of the gate by busting that myth, because it is a myth. It's 100% false. I think it stemmed originally from an oversimplification of what is actually happening. And so it started with this oversimplification, and then much like the telephone game, it's just changed and morphed into this scary deal, almost urban myth, right, of what autoimmune disease is, and that it's just this thing that you wake up one morning and it sneak attacks you without warning, and it's this whole monster. And this whole thing really, it goes hand in hand with a couple other myths we're going to bust today. But one of them I want to get right off the bat, aside from the fact that autoimmune disease comes out of nowhere and attacks you, is that number two is that the image that you have of your body, right? If you suffer from an autoimmune condition, or even if you don't, that image that your body is weak and vulnerable, or that having an autoimmune disease is evidence of a weak body. And that is simply not true. Your body, whether you have an autoimmune condition, another chronic condition, or none of the above, it's resilient. It's an incredible machine with incredible structure and anatomy and physiological mechanisms, and even a little magic too. It's a brilliant machine, really, and it's breathed to life, if you will, with a magical soul, right? So framing your body as weak because you suffer from an autoimmune disease deeply affects your mindset, your energy, right? And we know that science tells us, it shows us that our mindset and attitude about our ability to heal is as important as our ability to heal itself. It's very, very important. It's as important as the strength of your body to being able to heal it. So I'm here to tell you, and I'm here to tell you, and for you to share with others, that the body is not weak. And you don't get an autoimmune disease just by your body suddenly going all wackadoo and starting to send the immune system out to attack random body parts. It's not how it happens. So if you are suffering from an autoimmune disease, know that your body is strong. Or now know that your body is strong. And if you do know that, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comments below, and let me know, have you been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease? Maybe share what autoimmune disease that is. The good news is, and the really good news is about, a lot of people would on the one hand, it's good news that there is no randomness about getting autoimmune disease, but on the other hand, it's kind of bad news, right? The good news is that it's not random, it's not a weak-bodied thing, and because there is a reason, because there is a cause of an autoimmune disease, it means that there's a way to heal it, right? So, the body does not need protection from itself. It's not weak, and it doesn't need protection from itself via a medication most often. So know that if you or someone you love suffers from an autoimmune disease. So now that we know what it's not a weak body, it's not the immune system going all wackadoo and attacking itself, let's talk about what it is, okay? The best way to describe autoimmune disease is that it's a disconnect. It's a disconnect between how the body is designed to run in terms of the immune system and all of the different exposures in the environment, many of which are under our direct control and many of which are not. And most of which depends on the person, right? Everyone who has an autoimmune disease has a unique path of getting there. You can take two people with the same autoimmune disease, the same age, the same sex, the same, they can be identical twins, and they have different root causes, even if it's just slightly different than each other. They're completely different paths to getting there. So let's think for a minute. What does an ideal life look like from a physiological aspect? That is, I'm not talking about who you marry or who you date or how many kids you have, 2.5, all that stuff. No white picket fences here. I'm talking from a physiological aspect. So for most people, it looks like our body functioning a certain way, right? It looks like feeling friggin' awesome. It looks like having really high energy, having great bowel movements, a positive mindset, amazing sex, getting pregnant whenever you want, having perfect skin. It looks and feels energetic and full of vitality. And wouldn't you agree that these are things most people want, right? But the problem is we want what we want, right? What we want is over here. What we expect is over here. But we want all of it even though we're super stressed and we're consuming food that is nutrient depleted at best and lacking bioavailable nutrients at worst. We want this ideal situation physiologically, but we don't prioritize sleep. We slather ourselves in all sorts of chemicals in our homes in the name of cleanliness or in our skin in the name of beauty without consideration to the ingredients, right? And so that's what I mean by disconnect. It's a disconnect. Autoimmune disease is a disconnect of how we do the things, how we behave, and the experience that we want to have in our human suits. So I'm curious, is the message that you're sending your body a message that you want your body to be thriving? So I'm curious, is the message that you're sending your body a message that you want to be thriving, or are we communicating a different message to our body here, right? So one message that most people, even me, I practice what I preach, but I still experience this. But one message we are communicating to our body all the time is that we're going to die at any moment, right? Like everything is like the worst thing ever. We're going to die and we're so stressed out. So like I said, I am too. This is commonplace for all people, all ages even, right? This affects kids too. But collectively, as a human race, we are stressed out. This is communicated to our body in a real simple message. You're going to die at any moment. Our body, our biology, the cells and hormones and neurotransmitters, the immune system, it doesn't know the difference between stress by a deadline at work and stress from traffic in a commute. It doesn't know the difference between stress from traffic in a commute and running from your life from a bear, right? Luckily, we don't have bears here in Texas, but so we get upset and frustrated and we stew for days and hours and weeks and years about really stupid things. The body doesn't know the difference between that and actual life or death. So are you stressed out? Are you living in that fight or flight state day in and day out? I don't meet many people who aren't. Being in that chronically stressed and over-depleted state activates a whole lot of things in our body. It activates this cascade of internal messengers and pathways that are different than when we're nourishing our body, and that when they're different than when we're at ease and when we're secure. One creates chaos and many times can activate this autoimmune state or autoimmune dynamic, and the other one creates vitality and healing and reproduction and all of those things, all those good things that we're looking for physiologically. So what happens when we're in that active chronic autoimmune state? So when you have an active and chronic autoimmune state, the body's immune system is directing antibodies to a tissue in your body, right? Sometimes towards a process, but a lot of times towards a tissue itself, which over time damages the tissue. I'm going to use thyroid disease as a really simple example of that. Your thyroid right here in your throat, right? So what happens is the body is sending immune fighters to the thyroid, which generates inflammation in the thyroid. And then over time, because the thyroid's not going anywhere, it's attached in there pretty good, the inflammation stays and creates oxidative damage, which, can you guess what happens next? That creates more inflammation. So you end up with this downward spiral, right? Ultimately damaging the thyroid. And that's just one example. A similar thing happens with the joints or with the skin. So it's important to know that it doesn't happen, like I mentioned at the top of the episode, because the body is weak or crazy. It happens for very specific reasons. Most of the time, they are reversible. Sometimes the amount of damage that has been done, if the tissue is to a point where conventional intervention is required, and we can continue with the same example of the thyroid, but sometimes the damage has been done to the point where conventional medication or maybe even surgery is required. And so a lot of times people get to that point and they're like, well, I have to take thyroid medicine for the rest of my life, or I've had to have my thyroid removed, and they think, so making changes now isn't going to help. And that's not true, because even if the thyroid has been treated or is being treated with traditional medical interventions, the key here is that thyroid disease is not a disease of the thyroid. It's still critically important to get to that root cause, because the very best predictor of having a second autoimmune disease is having a first that is not remedied, that is just being treated conventionally and not at the root. So again, the key here is to know that thyroid disease of any kind, too high, too low, any of those things, it's not a disease of the thyroid. For that matter, no autoimmune disease is a disease of the organ it seems to affect. Multiple sclerosis, not a disease of the brain. Rheumatoid arthritis, ultimately not a disease of the joints. Psoriasis, ultimately not a disease of the skin or the joints, for that matter. All autoimmune diseases are diseases of the immune system. They just happen to settle in a pathway or an organ system. So what happens when we treat the end result, so we treat the thyroid, we treat the joints, we treat the skin, what we're doing there is incomplete medicine. You're receiving incomplete care. Conventional medicine may be necessary. I'm absolutely all for it for rapid relief of symptoms, but that's where it ends, okay? It's not thorough, and it's really critical to get to that root cause and put out the fire rather than just fan away the smoke, okay? It's the only way to stop it and find true relief from autoimmune disease and prevent a secondary autoimmune condition from becoming the new dynamic. And so I've seen this happen over and over and over again. Somebody starts out with something simple like heartburn, and then they're diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, and then they're diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And sometimes it goes on to a third and fourth and fifth condition. The only way to heal the body is to treat that at the cause. And the cause is not the stomach for it's not the digestive system per se for ulcerative colitis. It's not the joints for rheumatoid arthritis. That is not the cause. That's the downstream effect. So conventional medicine, right? They would have us believe that autoimmune disease is not improvable or reversible. And at best, you can expect some long-term medication to help mitigate those symptoms, which, sometimes that's the case, or sometimes that's the path you choose. And if that is, I'm a-okay with that. But if that's not the path you want to choose, then that's why I'm here, to give you all this information, right? So in the majority of cases, with commitment from a patient or client to make really progressive lifestyle changes, autoimmune disease can be significantly reduced, if not reversed, fully put into remission. Conventional medicine generally reaches for immunosuppressive drugs, things like prednisone or other low-dose chemotherapeutic drugs. And so what happens when you take those immunosuppressive drugs is that they're fueling the fire of other issues, right? So they're allowing other issues, almost instigating other issues to take hold while they're temporarily relieving the symptoms of whatever the current trouble is. So when you take immunosuppressive drugs, you are grinding the immune system to a halt. I mean, just stop. And one of the surface things that happened, what happens when you grind the immune system to a stop? People get really sick. They get really sick and sometimes die from things like strep throat or the flu, things that you shouldn't die from in this day and age. They get sick and die from viruses or underlying infectious issues when they're prescribed prednisone for long-term chronic illness. And so it's really important to take a functional approach, right? A holistic picture and not just a singular organ pathway, a singular organ focus before starting any intervention, especially when we're talking about something long-term and chronic like autoimmune disease. And really that goes for natural interventions as well. I won't harp on the subject too long, but it's a lot like using lemon essential oil in your water. Lots of people do it and they say, oh, I'm detoxing my liver. But you really have to look at it in a couple different ways. Does lemon detox the liver? Absolutely. But that's taking a natural remedy and applying it to an organ, a particular organ. It's a very conventional medicine approach without considering the whole picture. So if you zoom out from the liver and you're putting lemon essential oil in your water and swallowing it down, you are damaging lots of other organs for that micro liver detox. Just some food for thought. So medications like prednisone in the same way, they can be necessary. They can even be life-saving, but at the very least, they are overprescribed. And so we really have to be realistic about the consequences of the use and overuse of this type of medication. I see prednisone happening often as a first choice when it's either non-critical, chronic, and or lifestyle changes have not even been tried, right? So I could go on and on and on about the effects of prednisone, but in short, so I could go on and on and on about the effects of prednisone. I'd really love you to watch my video on prednisone, and I will link it in the description below right here on YouTube. But quick message is that we absolutely need immunosuppressive drugs to counter inflammatory surges, right? Better living through chemistry, if you will. My dad says that a lot. My dad is a chemical engineer. So, but we absolutely need these drugs, right? We need them to counter big inflammatory surges. We need them for emergent situations. We need them for triage situations. But you have to know that it's also reducing the inflammatory system that protects you, that protects your human suit. And so it's important to keep in mind that with every immunosuppressant, with every prednisone course that you take, it comes with a price. And sometimes it's worth it, but know that it's not the only option available long term. Even if we have autoimmune disease, we have to have a really good, strong immune system. Now, this is a point where you're probably wanting me to say, okay, great, I'm on board, Audrey. So how do I fix my autoimmune disease? It's not quite that simple. So 2 things I have for you. Through the coming weeks, we're going to talk about lots of different autoimmune disease. So make sure you click subscribe and ding the little bell for notifications. And that way you know next week when the next video goes live. We're going to talk about fibromyalgia. We're going to talk about multiple sclerosis. We're going to talk about psoriasis. We're going to talk about ulcerative colitis and rheumatoid arthritis, along with some other autoimmune conditions, so that we make sure and talk about as many as possible. If you have an autoimmune condition, you want to make sure that it's covered, leave me a comment below. Now, as for what to do about your autoimmune condition, what to do instead, it's a different pathway for each person. So what I invite you to do is grab a complimentary mini case review where you'll send me some information and I'll give you a mini case review on some options that might be right for you. And if I don't have options for you, I will point you in the direction of someone who does. So I appreciate you tuning in today. Make sure you like and subscribe. Give me a thumbs up on this video. Leave some comments. I love to talk to you. My name is Audrey Christie, Holistic Wellness Practitioner. Be well.